favorite, the Thunderous one. Thunderous, how are you this evening?
I'm fine, thank you very much, Lloyd. I hope you're okay, and indeed the audience too. Hope everyone's fine.
No, been a good day. Yeah. Everyone, please let us know that audio is coming through okay. No echoes. But it seems we are streaming, so just let me know that we have good audio. Sadly, audio is one of those technical issues we always have to be sure of because I have made so many technical glitches in the past. Yeah, so it looks like we're good. So we have His Servant, welcome. We have Horse, welcome. We have Deduza, Sister in Christ, Eva, Time Phaser, welcome. Villainous, welcome. Joel Thomas, Damian, Sister in Christ, Paradox. Gute Avond to you as well. Perfect audio. Excellent. Yeah, hopefully I will get better at this. Okay, guys, so thank you all for being here. This will be the final one. We actually spent, because of Thunder's contribution last week, we spent more time actually discussing some of these topics, and his input's always very welcome on the channel. Everyone seems to really love his input. So Thunderous, have you had a chance to, one, think about what we spoke of last week and look through the slides? Do you have your own input you want to add, or your thoughts or opinions on the content, given the topic of people claim Hitler is a Christian, and then looking at the evidence I have?
Yes, I've had an opportunity to look at the remaining slides, albeit briefly, but I've had a look at that, and I've also indeed watched the show again from what we did last week as well. Because with the information that you're providing, there's a lot to take in. You're very good at your research. You go into such depth that it beggars belief that this information's out there, but not extrapolated by the atheists so that they could themselves can understand the roots of their own faith system that they have, which is a damning indictment of atheism and atheists.
I agree. They are not seeking. Remember, atheism, oddly enough, predicates itself on Darwinism, which is something I know that you detest. And
absolutely, that's why I call it Darwino-atheism.
Yeah. So now they say you have an echo. That cannot be, because I think maybe just you. Does you hear thunder? Okay, you know what? I'm going to put my headphones on again. I have no idea why this would be, that you have echo. Okay, so Darwinism predicates itself on survival of the fittest, right? Which is survival. Of course, truth and logic are predicated on correctness, factualness, objectivity. So Darwinism and atheism, then, if they are true, they're not predicated on truth. So this is not part of their survival mechanism. It is predicated on survival. So it does what is necessary for survival, and thus lying would then be something that atheism would embrace if it had survival value. Don't you think, Thunderous?
Oh, absolutely. To be honest with you, when your premise is a lie to begin with, like Islam, when your premise is a lie, all you can ever do is lie to defend it. The exception is with Islam. Islam has a format called taqiyya, where it's justified lying in defense of Islam or to promote it or to protect it. Atheism, see, the things with atheism, because it's Darwinian evolution based, 2 points I'd mention is it really atheism? Which came first, atheism or Darwinian evolution from that faith system, which is evolution, Darwinian evolution by their own worldview, which means that there's nothing beyond the material. If there's nothing beyond the material, then there is no objective moral values. So from their point of view, it's just a collection of chemical reactions in various different compositions as to how they result in an opinion that they have. Anybody's only got to go onto YouTube and type in Darwinian evolution or evolution and free will, or even does free will exist? You have people like Stephen Pinker, Richard Dawkins, Dave Farina, and Lawrence Krauss. Sam Harris all agree that free will does not exist.
Now, here's the thing.
Does not exist. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I think the echo's from your iPad. Using your iPad, aren't you?
No, I've turned that off. I'm not using that. I'm only using that as a screen, but I'm using my laptop.
Okay, yeah, because sometimes I hear myself coming back from your laptop. Okay, so here's the thing, though, that, your thunderous voice, Josh says, it's thunderous and his thunderous voice, so that's why. So here's the thing. Logic is metaphysical. atheism claims not to believe in anything beyond the physical. Therefore, the metaphysical does not exist. Numbers are metaphysical abstracts. They are constructs. Whereas logic is also a metaphysical construct. It does not exist outside of the imagination. It doesn't exist in the wild, right? It's not a physical thing. So therefore, atheism by default denies logic. Would that be a correct logical extrapolation, Thunderous?
Oh, absolutely. Anything that's metaphysical does not exist in the atheist mindset or the Darwinian evolutionary or the Darwin atheist mindset, because there's nothing beyond the material. All the Darwin atheist has is the periodic table. That is it. There is nothing beyond the periodic table.
Right. So yeah, logic is a field of mathematics. Mathematics is a metaphysical thing. It's not a physical thing. It's not one of these. So, right, man is the measurable things, and only things that exist are physical things, and therefore anything metaphysical. So therefore, atheism cannot claim to be scientific. Science is not a physical thing. It is a metaphysical concept. So atheism ultimately is illogical. And that's something I will do something in depth on. So shall we finish our talk on Hitler versus Darwin? Hitler versus Christianity. So any final thoughts on that? The fact that from your looking at this, is the evidence clear? Is there any evidence that Muslims and atheists can present to prove that Hitler was a Christian, besides maybe at 15 when he left the church, or 16, and then is there any other evidence they can present?
Absolutely not. The research that you've done on this, Lloyd, is, as is normal with all your research, is irrefutable, refreshing and irrefutable, and a fantastic response to the atheist mindset.
Yeah, Ariel says atheists are ungrateful, and that's actually there's truth to that. I agree. There is a certain truth to that. They are nihilists. They are denialists. Yes.
There's a question in from Damian Kuzmik. He asks me if I have my own YouTube channel. Well, I did have two that got deleted by YouTube. My second one got deleted because I went after atheism in a very hard way, putting material out there, and they decided to remove my YouTube channel last year because I was putting things on, for instance, I called it the world being molded in a Darwinian mold. Yeah. For instance, maps or the LGBT movement, and everything that we're seeing in the world today is in the image of the Darwin atheist. But my YouTube channel got deleted. I've got another one.
Well, one thing I must say though is that, I mean, besides the controversial content, it's also that you were sort of pasting videos almost wholesale, without any editing, without any contribution to the video to mix it up a little bit. YouTube also eventually will flag for that. Okay, so you need to provide commentary and some sort of fair use with regards to the videos. Okay, well anyway, let's jump to. Okay, so I'm going to go back a few slides because I like to revise where we were before, and yeah. So let's have a look. So this is an article on reading the Old Testament in the Third Reich. We covered this before. I'm just going to go through this again. We have about 6 slides in total. Right. So the German Christians. Now remember the German Christian movement. Now Hitler had said very bluntly, you cannot be a Christian and a German. You cannot be both. You must choose to be a German or a Christian, but not both. Right. However, the German Christian was not an Orthodox Christian, as in Trinitarian. I don't mean like Eastern Orthodox. A German Christian was one who had adopted the Nazified Christianity, where the Bible was replaced with My Jihad, his book Mein Kampf. Hitler himself had become the Messiah. So this was German Christianity. Jesus had become an Aryan and a hater of Jews, someone who fought against the Jews and was killed in his fight against the Jews. So any thought on this, Anders, before I go on?
It's just a reinvention. It probably looked at what Islam was saying about Jesus and the Jews and probably thought, well, I think we'll co-opt some of the ideology from there and graft it into the Mein Kampf. Yeah,
it's weird that Muslims want to translate jihad as struggle, and those who want to whitewash Hitler want to translate kämpfen as struggle. It's fight. In both cases, it is correctly fight or warfare. So this is really crazy for me that they want to try and minimize it and whitewash it as struggle. Brando says, hello Lloyd, amazing work. Sam Harris is on tape saying he's happy to cheat in the election to keep Trump out. Yes. Yeah. This is true. And then Maman T says, atheist by word etymology rejects contemplative logic. Theism is the product of profound meditation on reality, natural theology, and metaphysics. They lobotomize themselves by disuse. Yes. Also, don't forget, atheism. Atheists love to claim it's the default position. However, the world, nature, clearly has a bias towards theism. But also, atheism is a negative position. It stands against theism. Now, you're not going to get a-housism, right? A-housism, right? If you didn't have a house first. Would that be correct, Thunderous?
I totally agree. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
You can't have a-carism if you don't have cars, right? Because they're standing against something. They're not standing for something. Well, maybe, but they are standing against theism. So therefore, they are anti-theists. I mean, they just argue about words. That's all they do. Okay. Right, let's continue. So the German Christians were a nationalist Protestant organization that believed Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich to be God's latest revelation to the world. Reminds me of a guy called Mo. Good grief.
When I read this, it was the similarity. You know, when people tend to say about the similarity between Muhammad and Joseph Smith with the Book of Mormon. You know, we're seeing something very, it's like a rinse and repeat. If you believe in Satan and the demons from the biblical narrative, it's like a rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat, because it's a tested formula that they've used that still works.
Yep. All right, so let's continue. So November 13, 1933, Berlin Sports Palace, one of the huge banners that hung that day from the balcony read, "The German Christian sees the gospel in the Third Reich." So Hitler's Third Reich was the fruition of the New Testament. So the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were the fruition of those Gospels of Jesus was the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler's movement, which is insanity, right? Yeah?
It's the same thing where, you know, the relying on people's ignorance, because it's the same thing with Muhammad when he said he came and he was quoted in the Bible, or the Quran is a further addition from the biblical narrative. It's playing on the audience's ignorance to not go and check the works out to see if that's the case. And it's the same thing here. It's relying on the ignorance of the reader or the follower to.
Well, it's a cognitive dissonance as well. They actually believed it. And also the Sermon on the Mount, they believed that was a sermon that was pointed at them. I mean, even though it's utter cognitive dissonance, and yeah.
But I was just thinking, what I find hard to grasp is there has to be some kind of context where, or some kind of line, or some kind of speech within, say, the Sermon on the Mount, where you can even consider that could be the case. When you look at the Sermon on the Mount between Matthew 5 to 7, how can you extrapolate that from anything Jesus said in there? In fact, if anything, when you look at it, it condemns what's being said by the Third Reich. No, it doesn't promote it; it condemns it.
Yes. So facts don't matter to them.
No, it's not. It's like you say, cognitive dissonance and ignorance.
Yeah. Okay, I've put Don Hugh in timeout. So Mick, let's let it go for now. I see David Bond is here. Throughout Europe, the Jews were persecuted because of hate speeches of clergy. Martin Luther is directly tied. You can draw a line straight from Martin Luther directly to Hitler. I've actually got a paper on that I will be covering in the future. And Martin Luther has a very, very powerful responsibility for that. Hitler believed that he was implementing the program that Martin Luther wanted for the Jews. Martin Luther, before he died, stated, "We should have killed them. We should have wiped them out." That was what Martin Luther said shortly before he died. So the Nazis simply implemented Martin Luther's plan for the Jews. Right? So the German Christians would have to throw out the Old Testament, which is unbiblical to say the least, right? But notice also, Reinhold Krause, in a rousing speech, called for a second German Reformation to complete the unfinished work of Martin Luther, so they were doing the work of Martin Luther. The implication was that Luther had not gone far enough in making the church German, right? So Martin Luther, of course, wrote the book on the Jews and their lies, and I've quoted pieces of that here, right? Now, the entire agenda contained 6 points, 2 of which demanded the dismissal of all pastors who were unable or unwilling to see themselves as Nazis. So any priests who wouldn't become Nazis were to be dismissed. Over 2,000 priests, something like 3,000 priests were thrown into concentration camps. Some were disappeared, some died, and so on. Others intimidated, others killed, right? And the forced retirement of all non-Aryan clergy. Taken together, it was clear that the German Christians wanted a church that took its gospel from the teaching of Adolf Hitler. We stated before, the Bible was to be replaced with Mein Kampf. Right? Of course, we can't have anything to do with the Jews. That would be terrible. Yes, like the Bible, right? That I believe there was a certain Jew, can't remember his name, starts with a J. Thunderous, can you help me?
It wasn't a Nazarene, was he?
From Nazareth, Galilee, something like that. I don't know. So, okay, yeah, I can hear myself coming back as echo from you. Okay, so racism and hatred of all things Jewish and the replacement of the suffering servant Jesus with the warrior Jesus formed the church's new faith. And that's from Röhm and Thierfelder, page 40. And that's Stroud, D, reading the Old Testament in the Third Reich from the Journal of Genocide Research. Right? So, yes, David Bond, that is true. Stalin was apparently tossed out of at least one, if not two seminaries. He left the church at 19. Stalin was an avid reader. In fact, what pushed Marx apparently over the edge and Hitler and Stalin was finding a guy called Darwin. They read a book by a guy called Darwin, and this led them down the path that they took. So Darwin has a lot to answer for. Right? Yeah. So let's continue. Germania, we mentioned this. Germany without churches. So Hitler was going to reconstruct Germany, and he was going to build 200 cities in Poland. So they were going to build farming communities, 200 of these, with little cities surrounding these farming communities like a little lattice. And these cities were going to have no churches. No churches were to be rebuilt in Germany unless they were of highly important historical value. So would it be Christian to have hundreds of cities planned to be built and rebuilt with no churches, Thunderous?
No, it wouldn't be Christian because you have to have a place to congregate. I mean, that's why it's called a congregation or an ecclesia. But it seems, Jesus said in Matthew, is it about the spiritual needs? So it seems a manipulation that as human beings, we have a desire for a spiritual connection. By removing the churches, you're then making the human being more subservient to the state. So it's almost like a psychological technique in order to make people more sort of like, more under your control. I'm trying to think of a better phrase, but a smart little technique.
The Stalinists did it, the Leninists did it. They destroyed churches. I mean, I mentioned earlier within the episodes that of 50,000 Eastern Orthodox churches that were in Russia, in the Soviet Union, in 1917, by 1939, less than 1,000 were left. Now, it's odd that Stalin, a devout Catholic, right? Stalin wasn't even Catholic. He was Georgian Orthodox. But I guess facts don't really matter. The fact that he and Lenin were responsible for the destruction of over 49,000 churches. Does that sound, again, Christian? Thunderous?
Not in the slightest. You're supposed to have love for members of your own brotherhood. So if they are part of the brotherhood, why are they destroying the churches? That's clear apostasy, if anything.
Correct. Yeah. So Ernst Hanf Stengel, a friend of Hitler during his early political career, said Hitler was, to all intents and purposes, an atheist. Right? And Hitler himself claims to be a materialist. Those are Hitler's words. He says, I am so much a materialist. Right? And he says this more than once, and I've mentioned this. So there is, again, as I've said before, reason to assume that Hitler was an atheist. Villainous says, a question, I'm wondering if you're seeing in this a mirroring of the creation of Islam, the political takeover of the incumbent religion. So, yes, I'd say there's a claim for that. However, do understand that Martin Luther, again, remember we mentioned how Martin Luther was a critical part of this movement, right? His ideas were inherent within what the Nazis were doing, especially part of their program for Germany, but also within the government control of religion, because Martin Luther believed in state religion. Martin Luther believed in sort of theocracy. Now, I know Calvinists will deny that Calvinist was a theocrat, but Calvin effectively had a theocracy that was running in Geneva. By the same token, Martin Luther believed in a religion controlled by the state. So he believed in which would be fascism, in a sense, where the religion is subservient to the state. We've mentioned that before. Your thoughts on that, Thunderous?
No, absolutely. And by the state controlling the church, you're controlling the narrative, and you're also controlling the mindset and the direction that you want the people to go in. For instance, if you want them to become nationalistic in order to defend the country from a war that you're going to go into, or any kind of law that you're going to implement, you need the church in order to sway the vote or to sway the mindset of the people of part of the church, so you can control any kind of rebellion or nip it in the bud, so to speak. Because there's no doubt within the fascist state you would have spies as such that snitches for riches, so to speak, that will inform of any kind of potential uprising to the state or to the fascist state, so they can nip it in the bud.
Right. We've got here Barnum and Bailey, circus sales method used by self-lobotomized, power-hungry narcissists like Hitler. You can fool most of the people most of the time, but you can first you have to fool yourself, and it's easier probably to fool yourself than to necessarily fool others. Eva says it's like hybrid. You cut one head and you come in same place by another name. Yes, it's the same idea, the same anti-Christian idea. All of these ideas, everything we've looked at, all of them are anti-Christian. They're explicitly anti-Christian. And Chevalier says Christians cannot be materialistic. For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for the soul? Fantastic point. That is biblical, and yeah, that's really well done. So yeah, Martin Luther, Harriel leaned definitely towards the totalitarian. He and Calvin both. Yeah, I'll be discussing Calvin in the future. All right, so now to the slide. This is where we ended the last time. So on this slide, so this is the Pöstlingberg Church, right, in Linz. Now remember, Martin Luther was confirmed in Linz, and it was mentioned by his, he recorded historically by his sponsor for his confirmation that he went begrudgingly. He didn't want to do it, right? So this is the church here in the background, right? And Hitler stated he was going to burn down the church. He was going to destroy it. He was going to create an observatory for science. Now, atheists love to talk about science, so Hitler was going to take the church and use it as a temple to science. The observatory I'll have built at Linz on the Pöstlingberg, I can see it in my mind, a facade of quite classical purity. I'll have the pagan temple razed to the ground. He's calling this cathedral a pagan temple that he will burn to the ground, and the observatory will take its place. That sounds like Carl Sagan talking. In future, thousands of excursionists will make a pilgrimage there every Sunday. They will have access to the greatness of our universe. Your thoughts on that, Thunderers?
Well, the first thing that was coming to my mind when I read the slide earlier was that when you look at the ideology of Islam and say atheism, they both, the way that they argue and present their arguments is exactly the same. They appeal to the same sort of like default positions, yet whilst having none of them. For instance, they're talking about raising that church to the ground and putting an observatory there for the place of science. Both appeal to science as their foundation, so to speak, yet neither of them have it. Both appeal to morality, yet neither of them have it. Both appeal to logic, yet neither of them have it. So you got this but yet both of them are intent to destroy the biblical narrative and any influence that the Christianity has on the minds and hearts of people. Both of them trying to co-opt.
I'm just curious, you know, the greatest man who ever lived is a guy called Muhammad, right? As we all know. Muhammad is the greatest man that ever lived. So let's have a look. The Nazis co-opted Jesus. Okay? The Mormons co-opted Muhammad or Jesus?
Jesus.
Let's see. Okay, can you guys throw out some heresies that whatever cults that all somehow, which of these cults that you know of took the greatest man, Muhammad, and made him their central figure? Right? Let's see. I mean, even in Islam, who is the Jehovah's Witnesses? Yep, Jehovah's Witnesses co-opted Jesus. Yeah, who else? So the Cathars co-opted Jesus. So why do none of these groups co-opt Muhammad? If Muhammad is the greatest, purest, most moral man to ever live. Any thoughts on that? The Moonies? Yep, the Moonies, Jesus. Why is everyone grabbing Jesus and no one's grabbing Muhammad? Why does no one care about this guy?
Well, it's kind of obvious, really, because when you look at the biography, that Jesus is the only person that's ever lived whose life course for the 33 years is alive is faultless. Every other human being, and you can very easily go and check the narrative or the biography of Jesus, and you're not going to find a fault there. And there's Bart Ehrman says that it's Jesus's existence is one of the greatest testimonies in secular history. It's beyond refute that he existed and died. Whether he died and then was resurrected is a bone of contention for the atheist, or certainly Bart Ehrman. But with Muhammad, in order to co-opt Muhammad, you have to understand something about him. And when you start, even with entry-level intelligence, we're even just looking at the beginning of his so-called to prophethood, he wanted to commit suicide. He thought he was insane. He tried to throw himself off mountains. He married a 6-year-old child and raped the child when she was 9. So you can't co-opt Muhammad because you're basically digging a rod for your own back as far as criticism is concerned.
Yeah. And also, Satanism is anti-Christ. Have you ever heard any anti-Muhammad religions? I mean, even in Islam, they have the antichrist. Why is it not the anti-Muhammad? Even in Islam, you have the antichrist that'll come back. Why is there no anti-Muhammad? Sorry?
Is that the Dajjal?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. They have the Antichrist. He's not the anti-Muhammad. He's the Antichrist. That's just crazy. Just something to bear in mind. That if Muhammad was so awesome, but Hitler did say nice things about Muhammad. So yeah. So the pediment will bear this motto: the heavens proclaim that the glory of the everlasting. The heavens proclaim the glory of the everlasting. This is the everlasting universe, not God. It'll be our way of giving men a religious spirit, of teaching them humility, but without priests. Right? So man seizes hold here and there of a few scraps of truth, but he couldn't rule nature. He must know that, on the contrary, he's dependent on creation. This is the world of matter, right? And this attitude leads further than the superstitions maintained by the church. Christianity is the worst of the regressions that mankind can ever have undergone. Christianity took man backwards. It's a superstition that has destroyed man's scientific and moral development, according to Hitler, and it is the Jew who, thanks to this diabolical invention, this evil invention called Christianity, has thrown man back 15 centuries. Very, very Christian. It sounds like that comes straight out of the Catholic Catechism when I look at it. Could be Eastern Orthodox, but I could be wrong. Your thoughts, Andres?
Well, the first thing that I thought to my mind is that you have to use the word creation, which is a contradiction of what their worldview is. And how can it be creation if everything came from nothing and nothing did everything? Where, for a creation, you have to have a creator, intelligent design. So that's a contradiction. But then when they turn around and say that Christianity is the worst of the regressions, I remember when I was first interviewed on Thaddeus's channel many years ago. And with atheists, I use a sense of argument, a type of argument called reductio ad absurdum, where you use the person's worldview against them. Yeah. And so looking at that argument there, Christianity is the worst. Well, my first question to some people would be, particularly atheists, okay, then you've got a daughter and I've got a daughter. How many different penises do you want inside your daughter before you say enough's enough?
None.
How many sexually transmitted diseases do you want your daughter to experience before you say enough's enough? How many pregnancies do you want your daughter to have by different men before you say enough's enough? How many abortions do you want your daughter to have before you say enough's enough? That is the non-Christian worldview. But then when you look at the Christian worldview, which is you want your daughter to marry one man, she stays together with one man, she has children with one man, and the two become one flesh, which is the biblical narrative. That's what every man wants. I've never met a human being said to suggest otherwise. And yet you're calling me an idiot, and I'm a follower of Christianity, which is the worst of regressions. Let's look at your worldview, Sunshine, because people have only got to look out the window at the moment. Go look what's happening in France. What's happening in France is a testimony to Darwino atheism. There's your worldview happening right here, right now. And you're telling me I'm regressive? Have a word.
Right, fair point. Yeah, I just got to get my doc back. I somehow closed my chat doc. Okay, they were back. Wow, David, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, guys, so what I will do is I'm going to resubscribe to the Biblical Archaeology Review, which has some really good articles. They've got some terrible articles because they've got some, oddly enough, they are biblical archaeologists that are not very Christian and don't actually like Christianity, but whatever. Or they have some very weird ideas, but it's going to be very helpful. So thank you very much for this. Okay, right. Let's move on from here. But thank you again very much for all the support. I'm very grateful to everyone. I really, you've allowed me to achieve so much because of your assistance. All right. So Lucifer on the Jews and their lives. We've covered this. Should I do this one again, Thunderous, or should I just skip over it because we've done it before?
We can just, you can read over it if you want. It's up to you, dude.
Should I skip it or do it? Just
do it.
Okay, so Martin Luther, on the Jews and their lies, right? So it is difficult to understand the behavior of most German Protestants in the first Nazi years unless one is aware of two things. One, the German history, and two, the influence of Martin Luther. The founder of Protestantism, yeah, people want to claim he's got nothing to do with Protestantism, was a passionate anti-Semite and a ferocious believer in absolute obedience to political authority. He wanted to rid Germany of the Jews, and he advised that they be deprived of all their cash and jewels and silver and gold, and therefore that their synagogues or schools be set on fire, that their houses be broken up and destroyed, they be put under a roof or stable like the gypsies, in misery and captivity as they incessantly lament and complain to God about us. Advice that was literally followed 4 centuries later by Hitler, Goering, and Himmler. That's from The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer. Right? Luther advised during the popular revolt in Germany of 1525, which was the peasant uprising, he told the princes to adopt the most ruthless measures against the mad dogs. And one day when I talk about this, we'll discuss how he said that Jesus wants you to kill them. In fact, you will gain righteousness from Jesus if you murder the peasants. Okay, these are the words of Martin Luther, right? You will gain righteousness from Jesus if you kill the peasants. And this is what he called the mad dogs, what he called the desperate, downtrodden peasants. And Luther employed a coarseness and brutality of language unequaled in German history until the Nazis came, right? And German Protestantism became the instrument of royal and princely absolutism, so totalitarian. The hereditary monarchs and petty rulers became the supreme bishops of the Protestant church in their lands, right? They mention here in Prussia, the Hohenzollern king was the head of the church. Now, the Prussians were, of course, pagans, right? They were thrown out of Poland in the 14th century. I actually went to their headquarters, their castle, which is quite an amazing monument. It's the biggest brick castle in Europe. In no country, with the exception of Tsarist Russia, did the clergy become by tradition so completely servile or subservient to the political authority of the state. He believed that the state had to control the church. You had to Google if you had a mustache. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's Hitler's mustache that I put onto. I took the mustache off of Hitler, so didn't the Pope also enjoy absolute power? Yeah, that's going to be a lot more complex story, but yes and no. There might have been some times when the clergy was weak and sometimes when the clergy was powerful. But here's the thing. There was something like, 500 popes, right? That's exaggerating. It's like double that, right? But understand, you have an institution, then you've got someone who's bad within it, right? That pope leaves, another pope comes in, and now think about it. Just like, okay, when Muslims and atheists want to criticize Christianity and claim it as violent, they will always say, well, 900 years ago, there was the Crusades. You're like, do you have anything closer to that date? Like maybe a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago? No, they don't. In fact, they don't, right? They have to go back 800, 900 years. Then they'll say the Spanish Inquisition, okay, 500 years ago. And then they lie about the stats. We know that Islam has caused major murder and mayhem today, right? We don't have to go back more than an hour, all right? We know Islam has done some major killing today. So, by the same token, when people want to criticize the Catholic Church and want to insult the Catholic Church, they'll go, okay, look, what about this Pope 400 years ago who did X? What about a Pope 900 years ago, 600 years ago who did Y? That's great. But they'll mention like 8 popes. They'll give you a list of 8 popes who are bad. There was something like 300 popes. What about the other 292 that they have nothing to complain about? That's really odd. Right, this bias for just this one little small slice, ignoring the 90-odd% that seem to be actually very good popes, very saintly men, very good men. Then, of course, there's only one Martin Luther. If Martin Luther is the foundation of the theology, the foundation of the religion, and he's a piece of trash, and I can assure you Martin Luther is a piece of trash, what are you left to stand on? Thunderous, your thoughts?
No, I was just thinking there where it says that adopted the most ruthless measures against the mad dogs. First thing that came to my mind as you was reading that, and as I went through the slide earlier, was you could almost see that it was Martin Luther also somebody that influenced Francis Galton and Francis Galton's book Eugenics. at the same time as Darwin's Origin
He
of
might have, I
Species.
don't know. We should look into that. But Martin Luther did change the public consciousness in Europe. One other point he said maybe Luther picked up from the popes. Martin Luther despised the Catholic Church, right? He utterly despised the Catholic Church. He absolutely hated the popes. And don't forget, Protestantism, like the ANC in South Africa, was going to fix everything. They were going to come and fix the evil, immorality, the nastiness, the horrid, evil, disgusting nature of Catholicism. They were going to be better. They were the guys who were going to bring the utopia. They were going to bring heaven on earth. So he failed, right? In many cases, they did much, much worse. So, no. Sorry, that he absolutely despised the Catholic Church and the popes. I mean, you look at his writings. It's not pretty. So, okay. So, let me see. Okay, I don't see the Hitler mustache. Okay, so let's move on. So, now the Prussians were pagans, right? We've mentioned that. And Martin Luther's, just before he died, shortly before he died, he stated and wrote, "We are at fault in not slaying them." This is the Jews, in not committing genocide on the Jews. Now, there is only one Martin Luther. If he is genocidal, utterly genocidal, then, yeah, this is the founder of the religion. Now, everyone says Muhammad was a violent, genocidal, hateful man. This is nothing to base religion on. Well, Martin Luther wasn't a whole lot different. So, one has to wonder, what flows from an evil man like that? So, okay, let's continue. So, your final thoughts, Thunderous, before I go on.
No, go on.
Okay. So the Hakenkreuz, okay? And we must look at a guy called Thor. Now, Hans Frank was a Nazi lawyer, and he was future governor general of Poland, right? At that time, he was involved with the Society for Heraldic and Genealogical Research, headed by a man called Dr. W. Daumenlang. Now, I've looked in English for these two guys, especially Dr. Daumenlang. I can find nothing on Daumenlang. I have to assume it's all in German. I haven't bothered to go look. It wasn't that critical, but yeah, there's basically nothing on this guy in English. So Daumenlang had discovered in the Hohenzollern coat of arms the Hakenkreuz, and we've just mentioned in Prussia the Hohenzollern king was the head of the church. Okay, great and well. So the Hohenzollerns were the head of the church. They were the royal family of Prussia with a huge castle. And what is interesting, the Prussians, like I said, had been thrown out of Poland in the 14th century. They were defeated, and they were pagans at the time. Welcome, Chocolate Lava. So what you have is Daumenlang discovered in the Hohenzollern coat of arms the Hakenkreuz, or the swastika, under the form of a solar wheel. So these were Lutherans. Okay? So the Hohenzollerns had a primitive form of the swastika as part of their family crest. These were Lutherans, supposedly the heads of the church within their region, right? And what do you think of that, Thunderous? That this family that was head of the church within their region, this royal family, that was supposedly good Lutherans, they were the ones that inspired the use of the Hakenkreuz, known as the swastika.
That's new to me, because when I did my research many years ago, I thought that Hitler took his swastika symbol from the paw of Ganesh, from Hinduism, because if you look at the paw...
I know, everyone wants you to think that. I know, it's weird how everybody wants you to think that.
But this is, because I think it's probably more convincing, because it is in the traditional sense of a swastika of straight lines, whereas this one has curves, but that's an irrelevance. If that's where if this is where the origin of the swastika comes from, and I'm more inclined to believe this than, say, thousands of miles away in India, as to what motivated Hitler to use that as symbol, then I'm more inclined to believe this information than the previous.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to show you guys something. So now, okay, I'm going to go to another set of slides, which is the next series that will start in a week or two. But okay, so this is relevant. The symbol appears throughout the archaeological record of the ancient Germanic peoples. Right, the swastika, as we see it here, as the Nazis used it, was common to Germany. It was common to Denmark. That whole region, the whole Nordic. Remember, they were Nordic Aryans. They believed they were Nordic, right? People from the north. So this symbol was entirely common to the entire region. It was something that was, for 2,000 years, had been part of this slice of European culture. They didn't have to go to Hindustan to go and get it. All right, let me show you something. Okay, let me show you this. Right, this is something I have shown everyone on my channel before. So let me go here quickly. Right, the Germanic Neolithic Iron Age swastika. You see here, Thunderous? You see that?
Yep. Yeah,
see the swastika here? You see the 4 swastikas here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, this is known since the Neolithic Age. Got a typo there. It's known since the Neolithic Age. Okay, it's called the Gammadion. It's called the Philfoot cross. Okay, the Philfoot cross. It's called the Crux Gothica, okay, the flanged thwarts, and also the angled cross, right? Haven't you got a curved picture of the curved version used by the National Socialists? I probably do somewhere. So the English use of swastika dates to the 1870s from Buddhist Hindu traditions. That's the English use, okay, that's English. But the Shavuotsk culture was an Iron Age culture from the 3rd century BC to the 5th century AD. And here's an example on their pottery, right? This region is now Poland. That's here. Okay, so this is northern Poland. The Prussians lived in that region. The Prussians controlled that region. They were pagans. And then what happens is the Poles converted to Catholicism. They became a Christian country in, I believe, 925. And of course, the Prussians didn't like that. They fought and invaded, and eventually it took like 400-500 years for the Poles, 400 years for the Poles to throw them out. Right? So this region is now Poland. Now here you've got a 3rd century Danish comb. Right, you've got a 5th century Anglo-Saxon funeral urn. So you're going from, this is an 800-year span alone, okay? And also you see this little curled image in the background here. This is called the triskele, and the swastika is related to the triskele. It's a symbol of threefold rotational symmetry. Right, so these are all related. I don't think there's anything more. Okay, yeah, I don't have to go. There's nothing beyond that. Right, so it's all Norse pagan, correct? It's Norse pagan. You don't have to go to the Hindus. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Well, now I can see why I need to correct my thinking, or I'm glad I've had my thinking corrected, because with that would have been the influence of the British Empire, because they would have been exposed to the Hindu religions and Ganesh and the swastika. So that's where many people default, because of the British Empire in India at the time. So that goes to the 1870s. But coming further back in history, as far as Germania and Poland are concerned, their swastika has a lot more deeper rooted in their culture. So hence why the imagery is more from the culture of Germania and Poland, as opposed to people thinking that Hitler grafted it on from the British, the influence of the British when it had India as part of its empire.
Yeah, and someone's mentioned the Teutonic Knights.
That thinking now, so if I've not got that quite right in the way that I put it across, I'm still formulating the thought in my head, because I'm having to rethink my thinking now and adjust it to this new information.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I can understand. Let me try and find you guys something for a moment. Let me try and find something here that may or may not be helpful to you. Yeah, okay, I'm going to show you a few slides, because I don't want to... This is Malbork Castle. This is the Teutonic, 14th century Teutonic castle in northern Poland. This is where they stayed. This was their castle. Okay, it is an enormous... I'm not going to show you much more than that. It is an enormous castle. It is huge. It is phenomenally large. Okay, let me see if I can find some other photos that I can show you without giving away too much. Okay, here we go. This thing is just ultra massive. This is the one side of it, then it continues onto the other side. It is just phenomenally large. Okay, I spent a day there. I spent two days there, in fact. It is huge. You need at least 8 hours to see this place. Right? So understand, this is... You can actually find all of this whole culture is within the Germans. You don't have to go outside. So I think, yeah, it seems to be a bit of a deflection, right? This is the solar cycle, the solar wheel here, the sun wheel. And look at this. Does this look like a little Ottoman cap here with a little moon crescent, the Islamic crescent here, Thunderous?
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, to me too. Now, let's have a look here. Here is the original Prussian Hohenzollern. Remember these nice Lutherans here, right? This is their nice little swastika. That's the new one, obviously adopted now by the Hitlerites, okay, which has turned 90 degrees or whatever, 45 degrees. Now have a look here, okay? Anyone recognize this guy? Look familiar? The Black Sun? Yes, the Black Sun, correct. Anyone recognize this dude? His name is... Okay, His name is Thor, and that's his hammer, Mjolnir. When he hits you with the hammer, you are very Thor. So Thor and very Thor. Okay? So when I hear the word Teutonic, my brain is to say plague as a dad joke. The dots connect. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's have a look at Thor. Thor is here with these little goats, and he's busy having a fight. Okay? And I have shown you guys this before. This is his belt. What do we see on his belt here? Thunderous, what do you see?
I see a swastika. My word.
Is it the Nazi swastika on Thor's belt?
It's the Nazi swastika, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so isn't that fascinating? It's like an Islamic minaret, someone says. Yes, that pommel is like an Islamic minaret, exactly. So ask yourself, is there something there? Is there a clue there? Is there a dot that we need to collect? Okay, so let's have a look. So this, right? So this is called Thor's Fight with the Giants, right? Thor strid met Eterna, 1872 painting by Swedish artist Martin Eskelvinge. Depicts Norse god Thor in a battle against the Jotner. The thunder god rides his chariot pulled by the goats, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And he wears his belt, blah, 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 and he swings his hammer, Mjolnir, which is wreathed in lightning. Right, so this is the symbolism that they were striving for. I don't think they were trying to be Hindus. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I don't think this is the look that the Hitlers were going for. What do you think, Thunderous?
I'm just taking it all in at the moment. For me, because of my worldview of what the biblical narrative is saying, is that there are many things that have gone through history that Satan and the demons have just grafted on, a continuation of a certain thinking or following or a pattern. And the imagery seems to be very much the same thing, where they've co-opted into another religion or grafted on into another ideology. But the symbolism has always been the same or slightly altered.
Yeah, so this is a pagan version of it. Now, certainly you'll find versions of it which are more smoothed out, okay, which are used in Christian paintings as well, going way back. So it also goes way back to Christian symbolism. So it's used across the board. You'll find this thing in South America. You'll find it on Mars. You'll find it on the moon. You'll find it in Greenland. It is literally everywhere. This symbol is everywhere, but they have a very specific use case for it. Right, to understand, it's very, very pagan. So now we come to the last, wow, new donation from Roman. Thank you very much, Roman. I don't have the details. It will go to my email, but thank you very, very much. I'm really grateful. So thank you very much. Yes, you will find the symbol everywhere, Evelynus. Okay, so on this point, Father Johannes Kuberger. Now we're going to look at the Jesuit conspiracy. Not enough curry, Lloyd. Sorry about that. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I spent a lot of time in... I've been to India a few times. A Jesuit conspiracy. Okay? So, yeah. So this I got from Deduza, oddly enough. He's in the chat right now. So one of the mods. This is Father Johannes Kuberger. And here's the caption, the title. A priest saved Hitler from drowning when he was 4 years old. Right? A priest saved Hitler from drowning when he was 4 years old. Kush says, hold on, I read the swastika as a symbol of the sun, the arms of the four elements, air, fire, water, and earth. Yes, definitely, it's certainly interpreted that way. You get the left-facing one, the right-facing one, and it's got different symbolisms depending on the culture you look at. If male or female, yeah, you have, so, yeah, there's just so many different variations of it. But being so local, it makes more sense to say Hitler used local legends. Thank you, Villainous. Yes. Being so local, being so literally intimately combined or intimately integrated into German culture, yes, he would have used local legends.
And who would have done that in the 7th century?
Yeah, sorry, in the 7th century, say again?
Yeah, who else took local legends and amalgamated and incorporated it into
in the 7th century? Who? I don't know. Is there someone? You know what? I ran out of camel urine. I might need to get myself a fresh cup because that stuff's great for health, and my memory's failing. Can you tell me who this was, Thunderous?
Somebody that probably didn't drink enough camel urine himself. That's for sure. Yeah,
we're fresh out here in Poland. They don't sell it.
He certainly took the urine. That's for sure.
So yeah. Okay, so I want you to have a look. Do these faces look the same? Do these faces, does this look... Thunderous, what do you think? What does the audience think? Does this look the same? Because this to me looks like the same person.
It's an uncanny resemblance. I don't know how they do it.
So, a priest saved Hitler from drowning when he was 4 years old. Let's have a look at the story. This is a brief history of boys of boy Adolf's rescue from river aged 4. This particular article is Alan Hall, Berlin. This one is in, oh bugger, I didn't put the newspaper down. This was an English newspaper. A short newspaper report telling how a 4-year-old boy was saved from drowning has surfaced in an archive in Germany, giving factual basis to a story that Adolf Hitler was rescued from an icy river as a child. The boy, who was to be Führer, was living at the time of the incident on Kapuzinerstrasse in Passau, Bavaria, just across the border from his native Austria. A Roman Catholic priest called Max Tremmel, who went on to become one of Europe's most famous organists, had long maintained that the priest who preceded him in Passau, Johann Kuberger, had rescued the terrified boy. He related before his death in 1980 how Father Kuberger, who was then himself only a youth, had just seen the boy struggling in the waters of the river Inn and dived in to save him. The story was never verified by Hitler during his lifetime, but now a small cutting from the Donau's Zeitung, the Danube newspaper of 1894, has been found in Passau. It describes how a young fellow fell through the thin ice on the river in January of that year. It describes a determined comrade, the priest, and the paper at the time was Left Wing, went into the freezing water to save the child who would grow into mankind's greatest scourge. From 1892 until 94, Adolf Hitler and his family lived in Passau, which is where he acquired his German accent, and rather than that of his native Austria. So the future dictator was born on 20 April 1888, which would make him 4 at the time of the reported incident. Some Passau residents are taking part to confirm that they heard the story of Hitler's narrow escape. It is likely that Hitler airbrushed the incident out of his life, being saved by a youth who went on to become a priest, representing a religion he came to despise, would not have sat well with the myth of being called by destiny to save Germany that Hitler constructed about himself. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind, there's a certain irony there that the man that went on to become, as the article says, the greatest scourge in Europe, went to destroy the churches and try and abolish Christianity as much as he could, reminds me of Khadija setting up Muhammad, who then went on, because without Khadija you do not get Muhammad. It was Khadija that influenced Muhammad into thinking he was a prophet. Without Khadija you don't have the prophet, but he then, by her actions, he then becomes the leader and prophet that he becomes for the Arabian Peninsula, who then for 1400 years has become a scourge to women in the Arabian Peninsula. Certain irony between the two of them.
Yeah, so Hitler may have suppressed the rescue story because it portrayed him as a victim rather than a conqueror and a hero. And the drowning episode also was featured in a German book called Out of Passau, Leaving a City Hitler Called Home by Anna Elisabeth Rosmus, a personal history of her family's connections with the town. She wrote that the banks of the River Inn provided an idyllic setting for the children to play in 1894 while playing tag with a group of other children. The way many children do in Passau to this day, Adolf fell into the river. The current was strong, the water ice cold. It flowed straight from the mountains. Luckily for young Adolf, the son of the owner of the house where he lived was able to pull him out in time and saved his life. So, Thunderous?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's Hariel Jonsson has just said, Waraka, yes, Khadija's uncle Waraka, they took Muhammad. That's where the confirmation of the seal on the back of his shoulder blades, the hairy mole, was where he got the, you're the prophet that's been spoken of in scripture. Waraka allegedly was a translator of the Bible as it was at the time, which is interesting, because if that's true, then why did nobody have the presence of mind of keeping a copy of the Arabic Bible that he was translating? Incidentally, he died 2 weeks later. The only man that can confirm he was a prophet is the one that died later. And another comment further down is, I live on a farm, may get camel, I'm sure it will be good business. Well, you don't have to worry about that, because if you type into Google, man sells his own urine in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, God, yeah.
There was a guy that was selling his own urine to other fellow Muslims at Mecca. But flogging it off as camel urine. So another guy that took the urine as well.
Yeah, another guy mentioned, so Daduza just mentioned, he was also saved by a British soldier in World War I. And yes, that is true. So Hitler, someone mentioned, Hariel mentioned earlier that atheists are ungrateful, but so is Hitler. Hitler had his life saved twice, and he is ungrateful. So rather than being thankful, the man was ungrateful. Instead of using this as an opportunity to better his life, to have a second chance, right, he decided that he was going to brush this off, and he went on to do enormous evil. By the way, you mentioned the, the Nag Hammadi is where we get all of the current Gnostic Gospels from, all the Gnostic books from. Nudge is, I keep forgetting what this word means. I have no idea why. It just never stays in my brain. Nudge means distinguished. It's got a couple of other meanings, distinguished. And Hamadi, right? Hamadi means of Muhammad, relating to Muhammad, to do with Muhammad. Nag Hamadi. So distinguished place of Muhammad, or to do with Muhammad's distinguished nature or something. So it's interesting that the place where the Gnostic Gospels came from, right? All these Gnostic texts, these apocryphal, false, unverifiable, unhistorical Gnostic texts come from a place that is named after Muhammad. Isn't that odd? And the Injil, the supposed New Testament of the Muslims, is entirely Gnostic. The Jesus there is completely Gnostic. The stories are literally taken from stories inside of the Gnostic Gospels. And the place where they found it is named for Muhammad. Isn't that odd, Thunderous?
No, it's odd for those that are looking at it for the first time. But when you look at it historically, you can see the pieces all add up. And there's, like I keep using the phrase grafted on, or co-opted, which is actually a phrase I've actually probably borrowed from yourself in more recent times, or amalgamated. It's the same thing from the past, but twisted differently, but it's been perpetuated through history, through the time. And the common denominator in all of this, and I've seen some of the comments in the chat, is that if you look at the biblical narrative of Satan and the demons, then you have to consider that they're the ones behind the grafting in of all these sort of like imageries that have gone from one period of time to another, to another, to another.
Yeah.
They have a slightly different twist of meaning, but the imagery and the source is always still the same.
Yeah, so you've got stories in the Gnostic Gospels and in this Injil of Islam that are identical stories. The Christology is the same. It is Gnostic. And the place where these books are found, this Injil, this Gnostic Gospels, is named for Muhammad. I just find that's a little bit beyond coincidence. That's just a slight bit beyond coincidence for me. Where do the Ashkenazi Jews fit in? Dude, seriously, like literally 99.999% of everything I've ever been told about the Jews was just straight up basic science, which basic science is abbreviated to BS. Then of course you also have alternate sciences, which translates to ass. So basically everything that I've ever been told about the Jews either comes out as BS or ass, quite bluntly. So yeah, I honestly,
considering that BS does come out of the ass, there's a fitting symmetry.
Thank you very much, Thunderous. I did not realize that, but yes, I'm a poet, and I didn't know it. Oh, Protestant believer has a BS in ass. Yeah, there you go. This is symmetrical poetry. Scientific poetry is a whatever. Okay, so moving on to the final slide. So the Donau Zeitung, a German newspaper clipping from 1894 found in the city of Passau, is compelling historians to believe in the local legend that has it that Adolf Hitler was saved from drowning as a 4-year-old boy in River Inn in the lower Bavarian city. The cutting from the newspaper, identified as Donau Zeitung, the Danube newspaper, describes how a young fellow fell through the thin ice of the river and how a determined comrade went into the freezing water to save the child, the Daily Mail reported on Thursday. The incident reportedly happened in January of 1894 when Hitler's family was residing in Passau, according to the newspaper. Hitler's savior, Johann Kuberger, was almost his age and grew up to become a renowned priest in Germany. And that's the end of our talk on Hitler and Christianity. So just a couple of odd points there. So Thunderous, over to you. Final wind down to you if you want to talk about atheism and talk about any... So guys, if you have any questions on this, please ask. If you have any questions about atheism, we'll bring Thunderous back next week. We'll have a little talk on atheism. But I'd rather that you guys give him questions and he can answer. Otherwise, we'll prep for next week. But any final thoughts and comments from you, Thunderous, and from the audience?
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you for inviting me back on your show. It's good to be a part. It's good to get the band together. I'm glad the band's back together. I just love your material. It's not repetitive. It's in deep. You do such fantastic research. I've been schooled tonight. I mean, it's an amazing thing to consider the iconography of the swastika there. You bring it up now. That's really kind of mind blowing. Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm sure the audience will agree with me, the sentiments of what I'm saying about your research and the way that you go about research, as well as your presentation. Yeah, absolutely, first class, mate.
Yeah, so I have some photos that I collected on the Christian use of this image, but I don't have it right now, so I'm not going to search for it now.
No, what I wanted to do, just so that the audience understands, is that Lloyd and myself are going to have a discussion next week sometime. And the theme of what I want to discuss is the way that the world is now and how it is molded into the image of the Darwino atheist. And this is why that we have the world today. And when you look at the biblical narrative, the biblical narrative is being attacked on two sides, one from the religion of police or Islam, or the other one that is non-religious, which is atheism. Both of them are attacking the biblical narrative. Both of them have an agenda to destroy the biblical narrative. But the interesting thing is, for me, though Islam objectively can seem as the more, because of its belligerence and violence, and no matter where Islam is manifest, there is tension, schism, friction, rising crime rates within those communities of wherever it's manifest. Atheism is a lot more subtle, and as far as I'm concerned, a lot more insidious, a lot more malignant, and a lot more corrosive within communities. And if we look from a historical point of view, for instance, say just after Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, or Francis Galton's Eugenics, or Mary Sanger, and these other sort of like great atheist influencers for the past, say, 150 years, and just look how society has deteriorated, and all of it can be traced to the removal of objective theism and its moral laws, and the introduction of atheism in society.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, atheism is, it's something that I will be putting together a different story on Darwin. We have to talk about Darwin. Darwin and the Nazis and Darwin and the Soviets. I mean, the story is incredible. It's mind-blowing.
So it's the one person's put in a question, his servant, a real question: is atheism a bigger threat than Islam? I know you've asked the question to Lloyd.
I'd say yes.
Absolutely, undeniably, irrefutably, atheism is probably an absolutely fantastic, you shouldn't say that, but from the demonic realm, the thought of atheism evolution is absolutely a contrivance that's unbelievably effective.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of people actually asked, well, why has no one put these dots together? Why has no one joined these particular dots? And I don't know why. It's almost like some people are partial to the movement, or they're trying to hide things. Like, I mean, when you look at Protestant history, for instance, I mean, there is such propaganda. I've collected a whole bunch of books where they talk about Martin Luther's history, and it is dishonest in the way that they present without details. I've got some books that are filled with details and others that are just almost lying outright. They are twisting the facts for sure. So it looks like some people are partial to the Nazis, and they want to present them to hide certain information. And I find it really, I don't have an answer for it, unless they are sympathetic to the cause. And this is disturbing. But also then don't forget that atheists and others want Christianity to be besmirched. And they will twist this information in any way to make Christianity look bad. Your thoughts on this?
No, that's the end game. That's the end game. The only threat to Jesus said, "The truth will set you free." You have to ask the question: when Jesus made that statement, what was he referring to? What truth? What would that truth set you free from? And ultimately, it's four things: lies, superstition, propaganda, and religion. That's what Jesus was referring to when he said the truth will set you free. And that's what the biblical narrative does. It sets you free from the lies, superstition, propaganda, and religion that are prevailing on the world scene today.
Yeah. So remember, trust in God, make everyone else pay cash. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it from me. This wraps up our story on Nazism and Christianity. I think the evidence is overwhelmingly clear. So people can say Hitler said he was a Christian. We've discovered why. It was purely for political reasons, and once he was in power, he had no interest or care in further promoting the facade of Christianity or Christian belief. Right? There's so there is no evidence that Hitler was a Christian. Right? People are now assuming that the world's greatest liar, the world's the most evil man, of modern times, who's become the symbol for Satan as a human being, Hitler, was somehow telling the truth, that he was a Christian, right? And this is obviously an effort to smear Christianity, but press them on the details, right? Push them on the details. I believe this series has been definitive. I'm sure there was more information I could have added, but then we'd be here for 50 hours. I think we've done sufficient, and there's more. Go check out my folder on Google Drive if you want to get more books. And Richard Weikart's work, Richard Weikart, Weikart. His work is really good. He's got a couple of gaps. I think he missed a few things that I picked up. And then there's some very, very interesting work here. And Hitler may well have been an atheist. There's evidence for that, right? So yeah. So guys, we've gone for just over an hour. I'm trying to keep my shows recently to roughly 1 hour. We went to 90 minutes yesterday when I spoke on my latest topic on whether it should be James or Jacob in the Bible, and we know it should be Jacob, right? We've discovered that, and that was a change made by John Wycliffe, right? And who knows why, but we seem to know that it's because he wanted to disassociate the book of James from the Bible. He wanted to disassociate the Jews from the Bible, but also there's a reason that James is very unpopular in the Bible. So we covered that yesterday. So guys, Thunderous, last thoughts to you. Any questions? Any last audience questions for Thunderous? And otherwise, guys, last word to you.
There's one question, I can't pronounce that name, but the question is, Thunderous, what dooms the civilization faster, Islam or atheism? Absolutely, irrefutably, undeniably. Look out your front window if you're living in a Western world and tell me what you see. Atheism, by far, is the most corrosive, toxic faith system, and it is a faith system that has ever come on this planet. Atheism is even worse than the Canaanite religion. And the Canaanite religion, when you look at the history of what the Canaanites were doing, because atheism does it all and more.
Yeah, it's crazy how pagan it is. I mean, in fact, there's a very famous, called Peter Gay, a very famous historian, who wrote about the rise of the Enlightenment and the French atheists in the French Revolution. I mean, they were atheists. And he called it the rise of the new paganism, So this form of atheism was the new paganism. It's crazy. So, yeah. So, guys, that's it from me. So, thank you very much. I hope you've learned something. I hope this has educated you, given you new food for thought, and provided you with a new perspective on things. The perspective we've been sold, what we've been told is, that the standard narrative is not to be trusted. And Moloch and abortion, same thing. Yes, villainous, I would fully agree. Atheism opens the door very wide. It is satanic at the end of the day. It has no conflict with Satanism. So, Thunderous, last word to you, and then we'll call it a night.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Thank you very much for the audience.
Okay, take care, guys. Good night. God bless.